Hello. In this video, I'm going to talk about the differences between motivation and habit and how each of these behave a little bit differently and when you might want to use one versus the other, um, and really how to get each of them working together for you. So it's interesting. I think at times when we want to get something done, the first place that people look to is their motivation. A lot of times people say, "I want to do this, but I lack motivation." So they'll go about trying to increase their motivation to do something, which is great to a point. Um, Motivation can be incredibly powerful when you're aligned with it, when it hits you, right? If you have a moment where uh, let's say, for example, you realize you're really out of shape or you're out of breath, you might be in that moment very motivated to go and start working out. Unfortunately, motivation can be quite cyclical. It can be like the different cycles of the moon. Like one day you'll be really connected to it, and another day maybe not so much, which can be a problem if you're trying to do something over the long haul. So in that case, it's better to shoot for building a habit. Um, the metaphor that I use is motivation for me is like lighter fluid that I use to start a fire of a habit. Habits, once they're in place, are incredibly durable or can be very durable and will get you to do something very often, whether you feel like it or not. Once a solid habit is in place, sometimes it can be harder to not do the thing than to actually do it. I had a great example of this. I would practice Aikido, and I'd go to Aikido, two, three, 4 nights a week. And but there were certain days that I always went, and I remember a couple of times that for whatever reason, maybe the dojo was closed, or I just had a meeting on the other side of town, and I didn't go, and I felt so uncomfortable because I knew I was supposed to be there at that time, and it didn't matter whether I felt like doing Aikido or not. It was just I knew that at that time I went to that part of town and I got ready and I took class. Um, Now, without that structure, I probably wouldn't have gone as often. If you're leaving, that decision to be made every day, it's highly unlikely that you'll be at a level of motivation that, okay, I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go work out. So, what can we do with this? I always recommend when you're starting to put a habit in place, you want to start with really, really small steps. This one author calls it stupid small steps. And you want the amount of effort necessary to start building that habit to be so little that it's a no-brainer. It's like, okay, I'm willing to, let's say I want to save money. I'm willing to just throw a quarter or a dollar in a jar. I don't have to think about it. I'll just do it every day. And then once the habit is in place, I can start to ratchet it up very slowly. Um, and we use our motivation, that lighter fluid, to keep us focused and make sure that we show up every day and do that. And once there's a bunch of debate in terms of how long does it take to create a habit. Um, People say anywhere from 30 days to 120 days. For me, I know a habit's in place when I do the thing, where I find myself doing it whether I want to do it or not. That's my indication that, okay, this habit is now in place, and then over time it will become really durable and almost unbreakable at a certain point. Now, I will say on the motivation side of the fence, um, that there are times in our life where something hits us so powerfully that it's as if the motivation sort of goes through a threshold. And once that's happened, very often people will know, that particular activity becomes a non-negotiable, and you'll find yourself doing it with great consistency. Um, so that is something that you can do, but it takes a lot, I would say, to move through that threshold. Sometimes it might be, um, let's say you didn't prepare well enough for a job interview that you really wanted, and you were rejected. An event like that might motivate you enough that, okay, I'm never going to show up unprepared to a job interview again. So that type of threshold event can be very powerful on the motivation side of things. Now, I made another video about motivation and the different motivational triggers, so I'd recommend watching that as well if you do want to know how to sort of pump up your motivation. I find that I mentioned that motivation is cyclical, and I think some of the reason for this is, first of all, what motivates us one day may not motivate us the other day. Um, and I look at motivation a little bit like humor. Like if you hear a great joke, you burst out laughing, it's a wonderful experience. And then it might be that even if you hear that again a couple times, it will still make you laugh. But at a certain point, it's you become numb to that joke because you've heard it. It's like you've already had the punchline. And sometimes our motivation can work like that. Something that really kicks us into gear one day may begin to wane over time. So sometimes we have to find new sources for our motivation and continue to sort of stoke those flames of motivation. Now, so the way that I use these two in combination is, I know I want to build a habit because that's going to be my solid bet in the long run. I'm going to lower my bar in terms of what's the minimum step that I need to take to begin to put this in place. So for example, if you wanted to start running, that first step might be just getting your running clothes ready every day. And then it might be, go out for a walk and then, run a block or whatever it is. So you want to keep that bar incredibly low. And then on the motivation side, I do want to build that up. So I'm gonna do many of the things I talked about in the other video. I'm going to think about, okay, what's going to be the long-term impact of this? How am I going to feel when I'm done doing this? What's going to be the cost if I don't do this? So I'm going to use those motivational triggers to just get me to take that minimum step every day until the habit takes hold. And then I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's the thing that I love the most about habits is, once they're in place, I don't really have to think about it. I just do it and I can start to reap the benefits over time. So, in the end, if I was going to pick one over the other, I would definitely pick habit. That's where I'm going to invest the most of my time because I know it's the most reliable. But I will use motivation because it's a lot of fun, and I'll use it to get me to build the habit over time. So I encourage you to go out and try that out, and I would love to hear about your results.